from the Spirit with glorious light. Confident living cleanses my soul, giving the Spirit fullest control.
I'm Mike Costello, and in the next few minutes I'd like to talk to you about some ideas and concepts for creating and building habits for success. Each of us has a different view of what success is. And in New Thought metaphysical philosophy, we believe that there's a connectiveness between both the physical and the spiritual. So when we talk about success, we're not only talking about success in a physical or material way, we're equally talking about success in a spiritual way. In our philosophy, very often there is a marriage of the two, and we work toward the concept and idea of bringing the physical life, the material life, and the spiritual life together. And for that reason, the issues of success speak to both the cores that we need to build upon in a spiritual sense and those that we need to build upon in a physical sense. One of the things that we can all relate to is the people that we know who are successful, whether they're people who are successful in a physical way, which is the most common idea and way that most of us can identify with success, or whether they're successful in a spiritual way, whether they are centered and peaceful and always seeming serene. They have similar qualities. They have some commonality of the things that they believe and the way that they behave. This marriage of the physical and the spiritual is tremendously important because we believe, again, in New Thought, that we live in our minds and not in the world. And if, in fact, we live in our minds, then our physical minds, connected to our spiritual minds, connected to the divine mind of God, allow us to be the whole persons that we were created to be. We also believe that this physical life experience, the life that you and I are in at this present moment, is an outpicturing of what it is we need to learn and grow from a spiritual sense. We're here in this physical life to grow as spiritual beings. And so our physical person is connected to our spiritual person, our spiritual being. And so our success in the physical is connected to our success in the spiritual. And so we want to have that success and that balance. Whatever success is for you and whatever you choose to make it for yourself is perfectly all right. For many people, success is having worldly possessions, having a good job, having money in the bank, having a house, having those kinds of things. For others, it's enough to simply have their needs met and to be comfortable. For others, it is simply to be at peace and have happiness. We're not talking about valuing anyone's success or defining anyone's success, but what we are doing is inviting you to examine with us and to share some common ideas that can build upon the success that you want to have. And then that success can become a reality in your life. Important, though, is the fact that we are spiritual beings. And so it's important for us to marry the two. And if we're successful in the physical, to be successful in the spiritual. If we're successful in the spiritual, to be successful in the physical. In the New Thought tradition, there's a great deal of emphasis placed upon what we call prosperity teachings, or the teachings of abundance. And those are simple spiritual principles that are applied to our physical lives that allow us to have our material needs met. And these are wonderful principles that bring about physical success, abundance, or prosperity. But they are built upon the fact of marrying again, if you will, the spiritual principles with the material life, and then bringing about abundance and prosperity that we all seek at different levels depending upon what it is each of us want and feel important about. So back to this issue of success and these qualities that individuals share who are successful in both their physical and spiritual lives. The first one is that if we are to be successful in our lives, either spiritual or worldly, material, we need to be responsible. We need to accept responsibility for who we are, for where we are, and for what our life has become. We believe firmly that each and every one of us is at the point where we need to be every experience of our life. That means that every point in your life and at every point in my life, we have been and we are where we need to be to learn the lessons that we need to learn from a physical and spiritual sense. One of the simple ways that New Thought teachers have put it for a long time is that life is a school of the soul, and that our souls come into this physical life just like we went to school as children. And we learn just as we did as children from the lessons that we have to learn in the physical life. So back to this issue of responsibility, fundamental to New Thought faith, New Thought truth, and metaphysical philosophy is personal responsibility, accepting responsibility for where we are and not placing blame. Not blaming the circumstance or the situation or our husband or our wife or our job or the economy, not placing blame, but taking responsibility and understanding in our awareness, in our minds, and in our consciousness that this is where we are. We may not know why we're there. We may not know all of the things that have brought us to where we are. We may not like where we are, but the reality is that that's where we are, and we need to take responsibility for that personally. And we need to charge ourselves with the fact that we can and will be guided and directed in ways to deal with those circumstances and situations. We have a choice. We always have a choice. We had a choice in every situation that brought us to where we are, and we have a choice in every situation to decide and determine how it is we're going to think and feel about that which has come into our lives. So that has to do with the point of being responsible, not blaming, and making and understanding that we have choices to make and accepting the consequences of those choices and not belaboring that and not being sad about it, but just being responsible for it. The second is that the characteristic of success is that individuals have self-esteem. The most successful people have a belief in themselves, in their value, and in their relationship to whatever it is that they're seeking. From a spiritual sense, people have spiritual self-esteem by believing that they are closely aligned with the power and the grace of God. And in that process, we build the spiritual sense. As we come to an understanding of our self-value as persons, as human beings, we build upon our physical strength in the world from the standpoint of self-esteem. So often today in religious circles, you hear this term secular humanism, and it's built around negativity. And that says that you can't be totally secular. You can't be totally in this world and still be spiritual and be aligned with the power and the grace of God. That's absolutely not true. You can be a secularist, you can be a humanist, and you can still be aligned with that which is divine. Whether you're a Christian or whether you're from Eastern traditions or whether you really don't know what it is you believe about spirituality, it is clearly practicable and doable to marry those two and to have self-esteem in both the physical sense and in the spiritual sense. And if you are an individual who has great self-esteem in the physical sense, the only caution that I would offer is that that physical self-esteem not become tremendously egotistical or ego-based, but that self-esteem be balanced by a value that you see for yourself in a spiritual sense. Again, it is marrying the spiritual with the physical. So we need to build self-esteem. We need to build responsibility. We need to learn in this process of building self-esteem and taking responsibility to control our thoughts, because the way that we think will determine the quality and fiber of our lives. The next thing, the third thing that we see in successful people is a sense of vision. And a sense of vision is no more than being able to see beyond the circumstance or situation. I involve myself quite a bit in real estate development, in residential real estate development. I enjoy it. I have fun doing it. It's a successful thing. It's a way that I make money, but I also am able to have recreation or enjoyment from it. And so I build upon that success by having vision. And the vision that I have is that I can see an old house, and beyond what it looks like, it may have a terrible roof, it may have holes in the windows, the yards may be devastated, the interior may be a shambles, but what I choose to see is how that house was when it was built. And the houses that I prefer are those that are built in the 30s and 40s. And so then I set about recreating that house and bringing it back into the condition that it was when it was new, or in the period when it was new. That is simply a demonstration of having vision beyond the appearance. Many people would look at the houses that I've bought and say, I don't want that house, it's ugly, and I just don't want it, because they're seeing it at face value. If we see life at face value, if we see everything and every experience simply the way it appears to be, we're never able to build that vision and see beyond it. If your vision is, if your desire and success is to have material goods, you need to build a vision that sees yourself with these goods and sees yourself acquiring and building that which you wish to build. From a spiritual standpoint, if you need to be at peace, if you need to be centered, then you need to see beyond your turmoil and your conflict in life and have a vision of your peace and of your serenity and of that divine source which is in you. So successful people will always have a vision. They'll always see beyond the appearances of what is immediately in their presence, and they'll see what can be. It is seeing beyond and nothing more. The next thing that successful people have is an ability to always embrace the concept of a win-win situation. You may say, oh, that's not true at all, because successful people are always cutthroat and they're always this or they're always that and they're always fighting. But in reality, those who are the most successful in the physical sense, and certainly those who are the most successful in the spiritual sense, have a win-win way of thinking. And that is that what is good for me and is good for you is good for both of us. And if it's good for more people, then it's better and it multiplies. It is simply a sense of cooperation. It is a sense of understanding and claiming the common good. And certainly there are people who use shortcuts who are successful. But for those who are successful both in the physical and in the spiritual sense, that is, peaceful people who bring about the manifestation of physical success the way they want it, are people who have cooperation with other people, have a sense of that win-win philosophy, and people who are understanding and embracing the concept of common good. And also there are people who believe in fair dealing. There are people who believe in being fair and being honest. And that, again, is not exemplified in everyone who appears to be successful, but it is exemplified in everyone who is truly successful and who maintains that success, not only in the physical sense, but also in the spiritual sense. And remember, we're talking about both sides of the equation. The other issue is that those people who are successful always accept and understand the universal laws, even if they can't articulate them. And the best way to say that is that they understand the golden rule. They understand that the way that they think, and they understand that there are consequences to the way that they think, and that there are consequences to circumstances and situations. And because there are consequences, they take responsibility for those consequences. And they understand that if a decision is made that has negative consequences, that negative experience or that negativity must be accepted. Remember, mind creates. Your mind and my mind create. And our actions bring about effects, those things that have to be dealt with. And that's true in the physical and it's true in the spiritual. If you're from a traditional background, you were taught that from a spiritual standpoint, you do certain things, and if you fail to do them, then God punishes you. In New Thought, we say that we believe that, but we believe it in a different way, and that is that God has given us certain resources, certain laws, and certain principles. If we choose to violate those principles, then it brings about consequences. And those consequences manifest themselves in our physical life and in our spiritual life. And so it doesn't have to do with God punishing us. It doesn't have to do with fate dealing us a bad hand. It doesn't have to do with luck. It has to do with accepting the consequences of our own choices and the choices that we make in mind and in action in our lives. We create success for ourselves and we create success for others when we embrace these fundamental concepts, when we're responsible persons, when we're responsible spiritual beings, when we build self-esteem both in the physical and the spiritual, when we use a win-win situation and embrace the ideas of cooperation and fairness. And last, when we obey the universal laws, which are best exemplified in the golden rule, and that is that we do unto others as we would have them do unto us, and we accept that reality. And if we live these principles, then success will be ours. It takes a change in the way that we think, and it is attainable by every one of us. And the good news is that we're all getting good at it, whether we realize it or not. And sooner or later, we will all realize and come to know these principles, and we'll apply them to our physical life and to our spiritual life, and we'll bring it together. And at that time, life in the physical and the spiritual will be much more fulfilling for each of us as individuals and for everyone in general. We believe in prayer and meditation as a centering force, and so we'd like to pause at this point in the program and ask you to join with us in a meditation. Eternal and loving God, we give you great thanks for all of the challenges that we have in life, for the opportunities that we have for personal success. We know that our success in the physical life is married to the success that we will have as spiritual beings, and most importantly, the success that we will have in unifying our mind and life with your mind and life. And we know that when we do unify ourselves with others and with you, that then we have success in the physical and in the spiritual. We know this in the name of faith, in the name of hope, in the name of love. Amen.
Those were wonderfully based precepts you set forth for habits for success. And the way you described it was step by step.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a marvelous thought that we do have control of our own destiny, and we have to live the life as you described.
And we have to marry the physical with the spiritual.
Yes.
We don't have to. And of course, many people live their whole life as physical beings, and that's all right. I think the only thing that happens is that then if we don't get it right, who knows what's going to happen. But if we're able to bring the two together, that's really the plus. And that's why so often in our church, and of course we are a New Thought church, and we do teach metaphysics and New Thought Christianity, but many of the churches like ours and centers like ours put so much emphasis on abundance and prosperity teaching. And we, of course, don't negate that,
Yeah.
but we really feel very strongly that if we teach abundance and prosperity techniques and principles for life, and we show people how to use it, but we don't marry it with the spiritual, then all we have is affluent people who are no happier than they were when they came to us.
And that's the point. How happy are we? And if we live the life as you described, then we are happy because we're fulfilling what we came here to do, which is to be whole and to live the life according to divine precept, and which is simply, as you said, marrying the physical and the spiritual.
And being a success on both sides.
Yes.
You know, that issue of personal responsibility is one that we've talked about again and again, but we can never talk it out.
That's right.
Because it's so important. And so often we blame any number of things. And I think modern psychotherapy has kind of contributed to that. So we can blame mother, right?
Yeah.
Or we can blame father or blame our childhood. And certainly some people have had terrible childhoods. But we see people, and that again goes back to the issue of success. We've seen people who have had deplorable childhoods, abusive childhoods, who have been both successful in the physical realm and successful in the noble and spiritual realms by sharing their wealth and abundance with other people. And at the same time, we have people who come from similar backgrounds who have become unproductive and have had disastrous lives. And it's a choice. It's a personal responsibility issue.
Yes. And if those who were unhappy but had every opportunity to be happy were unhappy, then it means their mentors or their social workers or their parents or someone gave them the keys for defeatism as opposed to success.
Absolutely. What we need to do is to get those people into New Thought centers, isn't it? Because one of the things that I think New Thought does in such a wonderful way is teach people to take responsibility.
Yes.
And that's not to badmouth or be negative about traditional churches, but in many cases, traditional churches fail to place the necessary emphasis on individual responsibility. Instead, the tendency is to give it up to God.
Yeah.
And to give up our personhood to God, which is not what we believe that either God wants, nor do we believe that that is best for the person. And it doesn't take away from God.
That's
Yes.
right. That's right. And we certainly don't make any personal progress when we turn it over to someone else. And God is love, and He's there for us all the time. But He gives us the strength and sustenance to live our own life and make our own choices and do that which we need to. And we know from within ourselves when we're fulfilling what we came here to fulfill or when we're not, if we're off track. And making a lot of money isn't the answer. As you said, people with lots of money are often very unhappy. It's not any one thing. It's living the life in a whole way so that we are a whole person. And we have to be a whole person within ourselves before we can relate to others in any kind of relationship situation, whether it's spouse, employer, employee, being a teacher, or whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. We have to be whole within ourselves. And the way we're whole within ourselves is to accept that where we are on the path in life is where we belong. Mm-hmm. Accept that fact and then go on from there.
Right, but our tendency is to not be happy where we are and then begin to decide why it is we're there and justify the fact that it can't be our responsibility and that certainly we can't be expected to do anything about it. Now, that's why I spoke a little bit about humanism. And I think words do build fences that keep us from coming together.
Yeah.
And in today's religious environment, so many churches and religious leaders just kind of glob onto this humanism issue
Yeah.
or secular humanism as though it's something despicable.
Yeah.
And I think the one thing that we need to understand is God made us human.
Exactly.
And if God made us human, we were made human for a purpose. And that's not to glorify the person in more than we glorify God, but there's
Exactly.
no problem in glorifying the person. And so often we say in traditional churches, we do everything to the glory of God.
Yeah.
And I think we could change that a little bit. And certainly some people would gasp when I say this, but we could say that we do things to the glory of human beings and to the greater glory of God.
Yes.
And so the glory of human beings is not the problem. And humanism is not a problem. As a matter of fact, humanism at its core is wonderful because the ability and philosophy of humanism is to take care of the human condition and the human life. The only thing that's missing from our perspective is the divine presence. But anyone could be a humanist
Yeah.
and still be a religious person. And anyone could be a secular humanist and still have religious leanings and religious beliefs and undergirdings. Now, an atheist or an agnostic may argue, again, because of the terminology. But my understanding of humanism is that humanism is totally compatible with Christianity.
Exactly, and we are here on earth. That is a fact. So we're here for a purpose, obviously, or we wouldn't be here. If God is all-knowing and all in all, then his plan is sublime and supreme. So the fact that we are here means we have to do what we can to fulfill whatever it is we need to do at any given point in time. And to be a defeatist or to blame others is not the answer. It's to accept whatever happens, accept that we have to make choices, and accept that the choices we make are the right ones for that point in time. And things don't always work out the way we hoped they would, but that's the way they went. So we can accept that that's the way they went and keep on going. It's just like with your investments. If you have one investment that goes bad, you're not going to just throw up your hands and let all of them go down the drain. You're going to regroup. So that's how we do with life. We regroup and go on from any setback that we've had. And what we often call setbacks are not necessarily that. It's just a normal course of events of life.
It's very necessary, and it comes to our choice.
Yes.
And how our choice and how we act or react to that
Yes.
situation.
And so we have to make the choices according to how we feel inside ourselves is the correct way in order to really know that we're doing what we came here to do. Don't let someone else make our decisions for us. Ask advice, get information, but ultimately make our own decisions on everything. And that's what we have to do with our children. We have to allow our children to make some choices. If they are not allowed to make choices at all as they're growing up, then they're not going to be able to make choices when they're older.
And we need to accept the consequences of our wrong decisions. But that doesn't mean that we should never make wrong decisions.
Exactly.
And, so often we're afraid to make a mistake. And I think that comes from our childhood when we're taught that it's bad to make mistakes,
Yeah.
when in fact mistakes are really growing opportunities for growth. And I think we need to view life that way. And so if we make a decision, going back to your analogy of the investments, absolutely right. And I've made a lot of them that were bad. If you make a bad investment, or if anyone makes a bad investment, it is simply a bad investment that has been made, and this is where I am, and I must take responsibility for that, and I need to just move on with my life and learn from it, right? And not worry about the fact that it was the stock market or it was the person that sold me the house was a crook or the bank didn't do this or somebody didn't do that. And we spend so much time in that process that's just totally unproductive, and it wastes our time, both physical and spiritual. And of course, as we upset ourselves on the physical side, we upset the spiritual vibration that we have.
The balance is
Yeah.
gone. And that's what we need to maintain, the balance of spiritual, mental, physical. And when we do, then we're living the life according to how we're supposed to live it, and we're able to make our decisions. And we're also able to see that when things don't work out the way we thought they might, that's just our perception. All of life is a series of perceptions. What one person perceives to be a totally wholesome, happy, healthy life is not necessarily that same perception from another person's viewpoint. So we can only go from our own viewpoint. And each of us are equally important in the eyes of God. So whatever perception we have of any given situation, that's the right one, if it's ours, if it's pertaining to our own life.
And we need to embrace it and learn from it.
Yes. And if we don't, then we're allowing someone else to take our power. And we've talked a lot at the church about take back your own power. And when we say take back your power, we simply mean live from your higher self. And as you're living from your higher self, you're making these decisions. You're being a success, as your talk was so very eloquently stated, that we are living the life according to the way we're supposed to be living it.
And as we take back our power, as you say, we teach in the church, and you have a class with that title. As we take back our power, it doesn't detract at all from God.
Not at all.
And this idea that every time we do something, every time a human being does something, every time humankind accomplishes something, that it is an affront to God is just beyond comprehension. And yet many people embrace that concept.
That's someone else's perception, but that's their perception and that's where they are in life. But it's not your perception, it's not mine, and it's not that of many others. Because the perception to us is that we function then from our higher self. Our higher self is connected with Creator God who made us. As we're connected with Creator God, we can't but make wise choices because we're living from that lofty viewpoint instead of living on the earth, in earth thinking. Mm-hmm. We're living in that wonderful way of thinking, which is bringing the spiritual aspect into the physical, marrying them, as you said, and living from both aspects simultaneously. When we do that, then we're living the way we're supposed to live, the way we planned for our life outline before we came in. And that's how we can do very menial things. We can do things that seem to be not important. But as we do those, if we feel we're doing them well, then we have a sense of accomplishment. That's the key.
That's the key, and then we're successful at every level.
Exactly.
And we can be successful no matter what our job is or what our position in life is or what our circumstance is or what our finances are. We can always be a success from the standpoint of how it is we feel within ourselves.
And as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Feel successful. We would tell everyone, feel successful. Know that you are successful when you're living from your own center of being.
And understand those universal laws, which have consequences. But that issue of taking personal responsibility is tremendously important. Dr. Freelander and I have been talking with you about some concepts of confident living that have to do with being successful. And we hope that you have enjoyed the information that we've shared and look forward to seeing you next time.
Dynamic power helps me be strong. Confident living comforts my heart. From such a blessing I can't depart. Confident living helps me expand visions of value, the kingdom at hand. Confident living, talent to win, gift of the Spirit moves from within. Confident living writes every